I'll be explaining the science fiction comedy, The One, today. Beware of spoilers. In a not-too-distant future, there will be two distinct social classes in human society. The rich will live in one, and the impoverished will live in the other. The wealthy, who led opulent lifestyles, remain above the line, and the less fortunate, working-class people reside on the opposite side. The government actually built the line as a physical wall to divide the two populations. An overhead view of the split in two civilization is presented to us at the beginning of the film. The right side depicts a crowded, decayed area where people daily struggle to put food on their tables, while the left side shows a futuristic-looking city. The border between the two segments is then indicated by the line, which is revealed to us after that. Like any other international border, the line is strongly guarded with armed guards and strict security. One is allowed to wander around on the other side of the border if they make it through the security checks. Then Stu, a man, is seen heading across the line and into the city, where he uses his AI device to keep track of the time. He starts sprinting as soon as he realizes he is running late and quickly arrives at a posh restaurant. There, a couple is griping about how unsettling and frightening it is to live on the other side of the boundary. Soon after, Stu goes up to his pal, who just got engaged to a man. Following the introductions, Stu begins to gulp his preferred beer, which his pals find odd. It turns out that Stu was raised in a below-the-line environment until he was 18 years old. His family migrated to the other side after his mother built a renowned app and got rich from it. We also learn that those below the line are given dates starting with their birth, whilst those on the other side must search for these dates. Stu hasn't found a girlfriend as a result. He worries that he will pass away by himself. The group is discussing when a stranger approaches them and admits that he was listening in on their conversation. Then he makes reference to a dating service called The One That's the One, which promises to pair up people perfectly. In fact, he found his wife on the same website, and they have been happily married ever since. The weird man then opens his tablet and begins displaying the commercial for the business. In the advertisement, a man provides a brief overview of the business. He claims that Dr. Nehari at Nehari Labs employs a mix of carefully chosen questions and DNA tests to match an interested applicant with the one that's the one, or their ideal companion. He then begins dancing in an odd way that lasts longer than the advertisement itself. In the following scene, Stu is at Nehari Labs and is gazing at the same unsettling dance playing on the screen. The same individual approaches him at that precise moment, but when asked about the commercial, he claims to be unaware of it. Stu is perplexed by this but chooses to disregard it. After that, Stu is brought inside the lab where he is prepared for questioning by being connected to various wires. The dude then goes through the entire process. While the machine extracts and scans Stu's DNA, he says he will ask him some questions. The information from the two tests' outcomes will help identify the one that's the one for Stu. Although scared, Stu accepts and the procedure began. Stu is asked his favorite number in the first question, but it takes him 3 tries to get it right. Upon hearing this, the man cautions Stu that in order for the perfect match to be found for him, he must provide honest responses. Following that, the man starts asking some extremely unrelated questions that have nothing to do with the topic. Stu makes an effort to respond to them despite this. The process eventually concludes, and Stu is asked to sign a legal paper. After paying the money using his digital hands, he receives a notification that his companion will be at his house at exactly midnight. Stu is surprised by the rapid processing time, but he thanks the man and leaves without asking any more questions. Later, while dressed to the nines, Stu is waiting for his date to arrive at his opulent apartment. Around 11:45 p.m., Stu is honing his conversational abilities. After 15 minutes past midnight, nobody has yet to knock on the door. Stu becomes frustrated by this and sits down on the couch after opening his jacket. He is deliberating when he hears a sharp ring at the door. Stu is overjoyed and rushes to see his visitor, only to discover that it is an elderly guy, much to his dismay. Despite Burt's introduction and entrance, Stu is still perplexed by his presence. Burt responds that he was sent as the one that's the one, when questioned about his purpose for being here. Burt consents to Stu's outraged complaint that there was a mix-up. As they both insist that they are honest, they are convinced of the error and decide to request a refund. Stu then sobs and begins to describe his miserable existence and how he has never found a life companion. Burt comforts him after learning this, and they begin discussing their lives away from the spotlight. It turns out that Burt worked there as a vehicle dealer before being promoted above the line. After the discussion, Stu invites the elderly guy over for supper, and the man accepts as Burt gets ready to depart. They then decide to travel to Al's restaurant, which is situated below the border. Amazingly, both guys enjoy the establishment and frequent it. They eventually arrive at the line, where a large group of security guards meticulously inspects them. They pass the checks and then proceed to the restaurant, where they begin to talk about their personal lives. They watch the same movies, too. They both simultaneously respond, "Egg white omelet," when the restaurant manager, Al, approaches to take their order. Also, they both like the company of the yolks and are on opposite sides. Here, we learn that the males share a surprising amount of commonalities. After finishing their meal, they say goodbye to one another and part ways. The following day, Stu visits Nehari Labs and begins yelling for the man. He enters a room and discovers Drive, Nehari asleep after receiving no response. Stu is startled and screams when Burt suddenly comes at him from behind. Burt becomes afraid as well, and he too begins to scream loudly. Dr. Nehari is awakened by the noise, and inevitably, he also begins to scream. Dr. Nehari simply teleports away after the pair press him for an explanation and flees inside a vacuum tube. As a result, Burt and Stu are left alone and they ultimately decide to go out and have grilled cheese. A dramatic change of circumstances results in the pair falling in love, and they then begin to spend more time together. They appear to be a match made in heaven since they are profoundly in love. The following scene shows Stu taking Burt to meet his parents, although Burt appears to be anxious. Stu, who likes him just the way he is, though, calms him down. After some time, Burt finally runs into his parents, who, shockingly, are very proud of him. The three then have a discussion in the living room and begin singing old tunes, which Stu finds difficult to understand. Stu then thanks his parents for welcoming Burt despite his advanced age. The parents respond that they are content to have yet another elderly person living in the home. Burt then presents Stu's mother the gift he had brought, which is actually a mechanical owl. The two are really pleased and ask Stu and Burt to remain for supper, which they accept. It's time for Stu to meet Burt's family, which consists of his two kids, at this point. Burt reassures Stu that the meeting won't be as intimidating as meeting the parents. Stu is anxious about the encounter. The moment they get inside, Plissa and Booj, two of Burt's kids, approach Stu. Plissa is eager to meet Stu and even compliments him on his appearance, but Booj resists Stu's handshake and storms to the backyard. Stu decides to confront Booj and discuss his issue after observing this. Booj rides a little pony into the backyard, where Stu introduces himself as Booj. Booj is unimpressed in Stu's attempts to engage him in conversation. So, he grabs a safe ball and invites Booj to play. The latter first hesitates but eventually agrees after much persuasion. Booj begins talking about his background while they are playing and how much he misses his mother, who passed away. After hearing this, Stu creates a speech that serves as inspiration and eventually succeeds in winning Booj over. In this way, both Burt and Stu's families are in favor of their union. After a 6-month period, the pair gets married and moves into the same home. One evening as the couple goes about their normal activities, their doorbell abruptly rings. The man from the commercial for "The One That's the One" enters after opening the door. He asserts that he is a separate individual and merely a technician for Nehari Labs. The man then says that although he usually avoids going door to door, something unusual has happened in this case. He then admits that Dr. Nehari entered the data from the pair incorrectly into his system. He claims that Burt and Stu are not each other's, one that's the one, as a result. Then he presents Burt's match, who is, surprise, Al from Al's Diner, as well as Stu's match, who turns out to be a stunning woman. Dr. Nehari appears from behind and asserts that science cannot be questioned when the couple tries to refute him by stating that they are married. Then he claims that there is considerably more at risk, necessitating the couple's separation and relocation to live with their new partners. He also makes a call to his bodyguards, who had been waiting in the adjacent room. With no other option, the couple ultimately decides to part ways and find new partners. Stu leaves the location after packing everything he has and taking a picture of himself and Burt. In the next scene, a heartbroken Stu wanders about the city. He meets up with his new lover later, but she doesn't appear to like any of his quirks, including eating the eggs without the yolks. Later, while they are at the park, Stu irritates her by putting some ice cream on her face in a similar manner to how Burt treated him. As Burt is about to depart the city, Stu understands that he is just wasting his time and runs to stop him. Burt enters the futuristic station known as the Pod Port before him, so he arrives a little late. Burt then teleports to a different metropolis. He begins blaming himself for being late since he is devastated, but just then, Burt approaches him from behind and claims that he is also constantly late. It turns out that Burt was not the man who departed in the pod after all. The two embrace one another and decide to live, below the line, together. The technician from the Nahari Labs and the weird man from the One That's the One commercial are both revealed to be separate individuals in the final scene. To support the channel, switch on the notification feature, subscribe for more videos like this, and leave a like. Thank you for your time.